She named the fault no engineer in that hangar could find. 5 in the morning, Chloe Ellsworth irons linens in a fitted maid uniform inside the Yoon mansion. On a cracked tablet, she studies aircraft vibration formulas. She is black, 24, an aeronautical engineering student cleaning other people's floors to pay for her degree. Her mother waits on Friday's tuition wire. Her name is all she owns. Then there is Yoon Tae-hyun, Korean mafia boss. They call him the Quiet One. A koi tattoo climbs the left side of his neck, above the collar of a midnight suit. His private jet sits grounded, humming with a vibration his people cannot explain. They send the maid up with coffee. She sets the cup down. She names the resonance frequency. She names the loose engine mount bracket. She apologizes. She leaves. She is right. Now the boss knows his maid reads engines better than his engineers. He starts leaving fault reports where she will find them. Blueprints. Questions. A fiancée already waits at the altar. But what Chloe said next, with her hand flat on those blueprints, was a line she would not cross for anyone. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. The iron hissed, and Chloe caught the fold before it went crooked. 5 in the morning, and already her third stack of linens. She pressed down, pulled the fabric taut, watched the crease line up sharp along the edge of the table. 1 down, 40 more to go before the house woke. She propped the cracked tablet against the sugar tin so she could read it while her hands worked. The screen showed a single equation. Aircraft vibration, natural frequency of a cantilevered beam. She mouthed the terms without sound, moving the iron in slow strokes so the steam wouldn't fog the glass. Her lips shaped the words twice, then a third time, faster. The tablet had a spiderweb of cracks across the bottom left corner. She had dropped it on the marble 2 months ago and cried in the linen closet for exactly 4 minutes before deciding the touchscreen still worked. It mostly worked. The last row of numbers on any page came out ghosted. She flipped the linen, squared it, set it on the folded pile, reached for the next. The Yoon mansion at this hour belonged to the staff. The family slept behind doors she was not allowed to knock on. Somewhere 3 floors up, the man who owned all of this breathed in a bed she would never see. Down here, in the pressing room off the east kitchen, it was only her and the iron and the low churn of the water heater. She liked it this way. Nobody watched. Nobody corrected the way she said the English words in her head. "You're doing that thing with your mouth again." Chloe didn't jump. She had heard the keys. Okja stood in the doorway, small and silver-haired, the ring of keys at her waist still swinging from the walk down the corridor. 58 years old, and she moved through this house like water finding cracks. She had a cup of tea in each hand. "I brought you one," Okja said. "You didn't sleep." "I slept." "You slept 2 hours." Okja set the cup on the shelf where the iron couldn't reach it. "I heard your light under the door at 3. Chloe took the tea with the hand that wasn't holding the iron. The warmth went straight into her fingers. She had not realized they were cold. "Exam Monday," she said. "You have an exam every Monday. This one counts more." Okja leaned against the doorframe and watched her work. The older woman had a way of watching that wasn't judgment. It was closer to inventory, like she was counting the things a person carried and deciding whether they could hold the weight. "Vibration," Okja read off the tablet, squinting. "That's engines?" "That's everything that moves." Chloe set the iron on its heel. "A bridge. A wing. Your teacup, if you flick it right." She reached over and tapped the rim of Okja's cup with one nail. A thin ring of sound. "Every object has a note it wants to sing. You find that note, you can shake it apart." Okja looked at her cup like it had betrayed her. Chloe almost smiled. She picked the iron back up. The steam curled between them. Outside the small high window, the sky was still the flat blue-black of pre-dawn, no color in it yet. She had learned the shape of this hour in the 8 months she had worked here. First the pressing, then the breakfast service linens, then the hallways, the glass, the endless glass. This house had more windows than a person could count, and each one had to hold the light like it had never been touched by a human hand. "Se Rin comes today," Okja said. Chloe's stroke didn't break. but something in her shoulders set. When? Afternoon. With the assistant. Okja said the word assistant, the way another person might say the word cockroach. They're doing something with the wedding. Flowers, seating. She'll want the west rooms opened. I'll open them. You'll open them, and then you'll leave. Okja pushed off the doorframe. She crossed the little room and stood close, lowering her voice even though there was no one for 3 walls in any direction. Listen to me. When she's in a room, you become furniture. You understand? You don't answer questions that aren't asked. You don't fix things that aren't yours to fix. You don't let her see you thinking. Chloe set the iron down again. I know how to be quiet. I know you know. That's not what I'm saying. Okja's sharp eyes moved over her face. She doesn't mind a maid who cleans. She minds a maid who's smarter than her. And you, when you concentrate, you get a look. Right here. She tapped her own brow, between the eyes. You had it just now, over the teacup. Like you'd already solved something, and were being polite about it. I wasn't? You were. You always are. Okja stepped back. 2 girls before you. Both clever. Both gone inside a season. She found reasons. She always finds reasons. Clever ones don't last in this house. The iron ticked as it cooled a degree. Chloe looked at the pile of pressed linen, the sharp folds, the work she was good at because she was good at anything she gave her hands to, and she felt the old thing move in her chest. The thing that had gotten her out of a 2-room apartment in a city an ocean away. The thing that would not sit down and be furniture. I need this job 8 more months, she said. Quiet. Then I'm done. Degrees done, I'm done. I can be furniture for 8 months. Okja studied her a moment longer. Whatever she saw seemed to settle her, a little. Good, she said. Be furniture. She picked up her own tea. The clever ones who survive are the ones who let people forget they're clever. She went out. The keys sang down the corridor and faded. Chloe stood alone with the steam. She did not pick the iron back up right away. She looked at the tablet instead, at the equation glowing there in its web of cracks, and she let herself have 3 full seconds of the thing she never said out loud, that she was better at this than the exam would ever measure, that the numbers on the screen weren't work to her, they were the closest thing to peace she owned. That, in the whole enormous house full of things worth more than her life, the most valuable object was the cracked tablet leaning on a tin of sugar. 3 seconds. Then she picked the iron up. Furniture. 8 months. The house began to wake around her the way it always did, from the bottom up. First the kitchen, 2 rooms over, the thud of the walk-in door, the cook's low cursing at a delivery that had come short, the clang of the big pans going onto the range, then the boiler kicking harder as the upstairs baths came alive one by one, each faucet a small pressure drop she could feel in the iron steam. She had mapped the whole building this way in her first month, not on purpose, just because her mind mapped everything. Which pipe fed which floor, which board in the service stair announced a footstep, and which stayed quiet, where the heat pooled, and where it fled. It was the same map she made of an engine. You listened to a system long enough and it told you its shape. It told you where it was strong and where it was about to fail. Her father had taught her that, though he'd never have said it in those words. He had fixed other men's cars in a lot behind a gas station for 30 years, and when Chloe was 7, he had set her on an overturned bucket and said, "Close your eyes, tell me what the engine's saying." She got it wrong for a year. Then she got it right, and she never really got it wrong again. He had been dead 4 years now. The lot was somebody else's. The name was still hers. She flipped a linen and squared the corner and thought, as she often did in the last dark half hour of a shift, about how strange a life was that it could carry a girl from that bucket to this pressing room, half a world from the lot, ironing the bedsheets of a man who crossed oceans in his own airplane. Strange and not funny. She had stopped finding it funny around the 3rd month. She had folded 6 more linens when the phone buzzed against the shelf. She knew the number without looking. Nobody else called at this hour. Nobody else knew this was the hour she was awake and alone. She wiped her palm on her apron and answered, tucking the phone between her ear and her shoulder so her hands could keep working. "Mama? There's my girl." Margaret's voice came through warm and a little thin, the way it always sounded across that much distance. "You're up. I told your aunt," I said. "She's up. She's ironing. Watch. I'll call and she'll be ironing. I'm ironing. See? I know, my child. A soft laugh. Then, under it, the small held breath Chloe had learned to hear. Her mother had a tell. Every good thing said fast, and then the thing she'd actually called about said slow. Chloe set the iron on its heel and gave the call her ear. How's your chest? Chloe said. You take the blue one? I take all of them. They rattle when I walk. Another laugh, shorter. I'm fine. Nurse came Tuesday. Blood pressure's behaving. Don't you worry about my chest. I worry about your chest. Well, don't. A pause. The heater churned. Baby, I got the letter from the school. There it was, said slow. Chloe's hand found the edge of the pressing table and held it. Which letter? The bursar, the tuition. They moved the date up. Margaret's voice stayed steady, and the steadiness cost her. Chloe could hear it costing her. It's due Friday now. Not the end of the month. Friday. They said something about the term restructure. I don't know the words. Honey, it was 3 pages and 2 of them were words. How much is left? Now don't. Mama, how much? A breath. $1,400. Chloe closed her eyes. $1,400 by Friday. She was paid on the 15th. Today was the 11th. She had, in the account that mattered, something close to $400, and rent on her mother's place came out on the 14th automatically. She had set it up that way on purpose, so it could never be missed. And that $400 was not $400. It was $100 and change after the rent cleared. She did the arithmetic the way she did all arithmetic. Fast, complete, no comfort in it. Okay, she said. I can call them. I can ask for the... You already asked them once. You don't ask them twice. They remember the ones who ask twice. Chloe opened her eyes. The linen in front of her had a crease going the wrong way, and she smoothed it flat with her free hand without thinking. I'll have it Friday. How? I'll have it. Chloe. Her mother's voice dropped the brightness now, and what was under it was the real thing. The thing that had been under it the whole call. I don't want you doing anything foolish. I don't want you borrowing off those people. I don't want you owing that house $1. You hear me? Not $1. That house takes, and it don't give back the same shape. I'm not borrowing off anybody. Because I know you. You'll find a way, and I won't like the way. I'm not. Chloe stopped, softened it. I have money coming. There's a thing at the school, an assessment, a stipend for the lab work. I did the analysis, they pay for the analysis. It's coming. That was almost true. There was a stipend. It was smaller than $1,400 and it came in April. But her mother didn't need April. Her mother needed to hang up the phone and take the blue pill and not lie awake, and so Chloe gave her the true-shaped thing instead of the true thing, and told herself it was mercy and not a lie, and mostly believed it. You're a good girl, Margaret said, and the relief in it was so plain it hurt worse than the fear had. You were always a good girl, you know your daddy said. I know what daddy said. He said that name is the only thing nobody can garnish. A wet laugh. Garnish. He loved that word. Nobody can garnish your name, Chloe Bell. They can take the car. They can take the house. They took plenty. They never got the name. I know, Mama. So you keep it clean. Whatever you do over there in that rich man's house, you keep your name clean. Because it's coming home to me, and it's the only thing coming home to me that I care about. Chloe pressed the phone harder against her ear. Out the high window the sky had cracked open at the bottom edge, a thin line of gray gold where the night was letting go. First light. The pressing had to be done before it filled the room. I'll keep it clean, she said. Take the blue one. I'll call Sunday. Sunday. I'll be up. You'll be asleep. I'll be up, Margaret said, which meant she would set an alarm and sit by the phone in the dark, and they both knew it, and neither said it. Love you, baby. Love you, Mama. The line went quiet. Chloe held the dead phone against her shoulder for one more second, the way you hold a door before it fully shuts. Then she set it on the shelf, screen down, and picked the iron back up. $1,400 by Friday. $400 in the account, $100 after rent. She pressed the crease flat. The number sat in her like a stone she could not put down, so she did what she always did with a problem too big for the hour. She broke it into pieces. Overtime. The head housekeeper could authorize overtime, and Okajah liked her, And there was the wedding load coming. Extra rooms, extra hours, extra hands needed. She could ask for the hours, not for money. Never ask that house for money. Her mother was right. Her mother was always right about that house. But hours were not money. Hours were work. She could sell work all day and owe nobody anything, and keep the name clean. She would ask Okeja. After the pressing. Before Seirin came. She ran the hours in her head while her hands kept working. The wedding was 10 days out. That meant deep cleaning the west wing, opening rooms that had been shut since spring, airing linens that would each need pressing. This pressing, her pressing. Say 4 extra hours a day. Say the head housekeeper signed off, which she would, because the work was real and the house wanted it done. 4 hours a day at her rate, for the days before Friday came to, she did the multiplication twice to be sure. Not 1,400. 900, if she was lucky, and they paid the wedding premium. 900 against a 1,400 wall. So the overtime wasn't the whole answer. It was most of an answer, and most of an answer was a thing you could build the rest onto. She still had the watch. She let herself think about the watch for exactly as long as it took to press one pillowcase. Her father's watch. Steel, ugly, honest, worth maybe 500 to a man who understood what it was, and 40 to a man who didn't. It sat in a sock in her room. She had promised herself she would starve before she sold it, and she had meant the promise. And she understood now that promises like that were made by people who hadn't yet met a Friday with a wall in it. 900 in hours, 500 in steel, 1,400. It closed. Barely, and at a cost she would feel for years. But it closed, and nobody in this house would be owed a single dollar, and the name would come home to her mother clean. She had a plan now, and the stone got a little lighter, the way it always did once she had turned it into a list. She was on the last of the linens when the bell system chimed. Not the front, the internal board, the little brass and glass panel by the kitchen door that had gone almost extinct in most houses, but that the Yoon family kept, because the Yoon family kept old things that made staff move faster. A number lit up on it. Chloe glanced through the doorway and read it. Not the family floors, not the west rooms. The garage line. She frowned. The garage bell almost never rang for house staff. The garage had its own men, drivers, the security detail, the ones in black who did not speak to her and whom she had learned not to speak to. She had been inside the vehicle bays exactly twice in 8 months, both times to deliver something and leave. The bell chimed again, insistent, then a third time. Chloe set the iron down properly, unplugged it, coiled the cord the way you did when you didn't know how long you'd be gone. She smoothed her apron. Checked the mirror by the door out of habit. The uniform sat right, fitted and black and white and immaculate. The black tights without a run. The hair pinned back off her face. Furniture, she looked like furniture. Good. Okeja appeared at the end of the corridor, moving fast, keys jumping at her hip. You hear the garage? I hear it. Kitchen slammed. Breakfast's up in 20. I've got nobody. Okeja was already pressing a thermal carafe into Chloe's hands, still hot, the smell of coffee sharp off the spout. They want coffee down in the vehicle bay. The far one, the private hangar side. The hangar? The plane hangar, yes. Don't ask me why the men can't pour their own coffee. God gave them hands. Okeja pushed a stack of paper cups at her, then a folded cloth. You go, you set it down, you pour if they ask, you leave. You understand me? That's the detail down there. That's not a room you linger in. In, down, out. In, down, out, Chloe said. There's something wrong with the airplane. Okeja lowered her voice, though the corridor was empty. Been wrong since yesterday. He's down there himself this morning, before the sun, which he doesn't do, so everybody's teeth are on edge. You go in soft and you come out softer. Chloe felt the word land. He. She had worked 8 months in this house, and stood in the same room as the man who owned it, perhaps 4 times, always at a distance, always as furniture, always with her eyes down where they belonged. Yoon Taehyun. The staff said his name the way you'd say the name of weather. The quiet one, the older men called him, and they didn't say it like a compliment, they said it like a warning. Is he? She stopped herself. It wasn't a question that got asked. He's himself, Okja said, which answered nothing and everything. Go, And Chloe. She caught her sleeve as she turned. Whatever's wrong with that plane, it is not your problem. Coffee is your problem. You hear me? You've got a look coming on already. I don't have a look. You've got the look, the teacup look. Okay, Ja, let go of her sleeve. 8 months, you said it yourself. Be furniture for 8 months. 8 months, Chloe said. She balanced the carafe against her hip, the cups in the crook of her arm, and went down the service stair toward the far end of the property, where the low white buildings held the cars nobody in her family would ever drive, and the single narrow aircraft that the man upstairs used to cross a world she would only ever cross in the cheapest seat available. The stair was cold. The dawn had reached the tall windows on the landing and laid long, pale rectangles across the stone, and she walked through them one at a time, light and dark, the coffee warm against her side. 2 men in black came up the stair as she went down. Security. She stepped to the rail to let them pass, eyes lowered the way you kept them lowered for the men in black, and they went by without a word, without a glance, one of them talking low into a device at his collar. She caught 3 words of it: grounded and mount, and the boss, before the stairwell swallowed the rest. She filed the words the way she filed everything, without meaning to, and kept moving. She reminded herself of the shape of the morning she still had to get through. Coffee down. Coffee poured, if asked. Out. Then back up to finish the pressing. Then breakfast linens. Then the glass. Then find Okya and ask for the wedding hours before Seirin arrived, and the house went tight around the fiancé like a fist. If she was quick, she could have the overtime signed by noon. If she was quick, she could have the whole thing solved. The wall pushed back to Friday, her mother sleeping easy, before the woman who ran clever girls out of this house ever set a heel on the marble. Quick and quiet. In, down, out. She said it to herself once more, like a hymn, like the note you hum to keep from hearing the other note. She thought about the number. 1400. She thought about the overtime she would ask for, the hours she would sell, the name she would keep clean. She built the plan again as she walked, brick by brick, because a plan was the only thing that made the stone light enough to carry. She did not think about the airplane. The airplane was not her problem. At the bottom of the stair, a corridor ran straight toward a set of wide doors, and through the gap where they stood open, she could already hear it. Men's voices, low and clipped, the particular flat sound of people who were angry and being careful not to show it. Somewhere under the voices, a machine idled and then wound down and then idled again, a mechanic testing something, chasing something, not finding it. And then, threaded under the idle, so faint she almost missed it, a hum. A single note, rising when the engine spun up, sitting steady, sitting wrong. Chloe's feet slowed on the stone without her deciding it. She caught herself, kept walking. In, down, out. Coffee is your problem. She reached the doors and stopped at the threshold the way you were supposed to, waiting to be seen before she stepped into a room that belonged to men like these. The carafe was warm against her hip, the cracked tablet was 3 floors up, leaning on a tin of sugar, and the equation on it was about the natural frequency of things that move, about the one note hidden in every object that will shake it apart if you find it. The engine spun up again beyond the doors. The hum climbed with it, sat wrong, and in the space between her eyes, exactly where Okja had tapped, the look came on all by itself. She pushed the doors with her shoulder because both hands were full. The hanger swallowed the sound of her shoes. It was bigger than she had pictured from the servants' talk, high enough to lose the ceiling in shadow, and the jet sat in the middle of it under white work lights, like something pinned to a table for dissection. 6 men stood near the left engine. One of them turned the machine over again, and the whole building filled with that rising note. Chloe stopped 3 steps in. The note climbed, leveled, and hung there. It pressed against her teeth. She had heard it through the doors and told herself she was wrong, that a girl with coffee had no business hearing anything. She was not wrong. The sound had a shape, and the shape was ugly. Coffee, she said, low to no one and everyone. Nobody looked. A man in a gray mechanic's coverall was crouched under the wing with a tablet of his own, scrolling numbers, shaking his head. 2 others in suits stood with their arms crossed, and at the front of the engine, one hand flat against the cowling as if he could feel the fault through his palm, stood a man in charcoal with his back to her. She knew the back of that suit. Everyone in the house knew it. She set the carafe on the rolling steel cart by the wall, stacked the paper cups, poured the first one because her hands needed something to do while her ears kept working without her permission. The engine spun down, the note fell away, and the relief of its leaving was almost physical. Again, the man in charcoal said. The mechanic wiped his mouth. Sir, it'll read the same. Again, the engine woke. The note came back up the ladder, rung by rung, and this time, Chloe counted without meaning to. She had been counting things her whole life. Her father had made a game of it in the yard behind the gas station, tapping a wrench on a fender, asking her how many times a second, and she had learned to feel the number in her chest before she could put it into words. She felt it now. The number sat wrong against the size of that engine. Too low. A big fan turning that fast should sing higher than this. Something was answering it. Something loose was catching the beat and giving it back. She poured the second cup. Bring it here, a suited man said, snapping fingers at her without turning. The boss takes it black. So she carried it. Down the length of the wing, past the mechanic who did not look up, into the ring of white light where the heat off the running engine touched her face. She held the cup out at the level of the man's hand. He took it without looking at her, which was the correct outcome, the outcome Okja had prayed for. In, down, out. She was already turning to go. The engine ran, the note held, and under it, faint, a second sound started, a flutter that came in and out like a bad radio, and her feet stopped on their own. She looked at the engine. She should not have looked at the engine. The man beside her felt her stop. He turned his head. She caught the koi tattoo climbing his neck out of the corner of her eye, the calm, heavy line of his brow, and she understood in her stomach exactly whose attention she had just walked into. She dropped her gaze to the floor where it belonged. Sorry, she said. Excuse me. She took a step. You heard something? The words landed on her back, quiet, not a question, the way her mother's warnings were not questions. She stopped again, because stopping was the only honest thing to do, and honesty this early in the morning felt like a luxury she was about to pay for. No, sir. You stopped twice. The mechanic had looked up now. The suited men had gone still. The engine kept turning, filling the pause with that low, wrong note, and she stood in the middle of it, with an empty tray hanging from one hand. She could lie again. She was good at the small mercy of a lie. She had used one on her mother an hour ago. She could say the floor was slick, the heat was much. She felt faint. Okja's voice was in her ear. Be furniture. Furniture does not stop twice. Furniture does not hear the difference between a fan singing and a bracket answering it. But her father was in her other ear, and her father had 30 years of engines and one rule about her name, and the rule did not have an exception for keeping her head down in a rich man's hangar. It's not the engine, she said. Someone laughed. Short. The mechanic set his tablet down on the concrete a little too hard. It's not the engine, she said again, and heard how it sounded and kept going anyway, because she had already spent the mercy. The engine's fine. Something's answering it. The man in charcoal turned the rest of the way around. She made herself look at his shoes, then his hands, then the cup he held untouched. Not his face. His face was a place she had no rank to go. Answering it, he said. Resonance. The word came out steadier than she was. When something turns at the right speed, it finds a thing nearby that likes to shake at that same speed. And that thing starts shaking too, harder and harder, off almost nothing. You hear the note underneath the note? That's not the fan. That's something loose finding the fan's rhythm and singing back. The hangar was very quiet under the running engine. Everyone hears the note, the mechanic said. That's why we're all standing here at 5 in the morning, sweetheart, running gas. The word sat in the air. Sweetheart. She let it go past her, because arguing with it would cost her the only thing that mattered, which was the bracket, which was the truth, which had nothing to do with what he thought a girl with a tray could know. She kept her eyes on the engine. You've run it warm and cold, she said. You've swapped sensors. You've probably pulled the whole fan and balanced it and put it back, and it read clean, and it drove you out of your mind, because a thing that reads clean is not supposed to sing. The mechanic's mouth opened and stayed open. That's not a guess, she added. That's just what you'd have to have done already, or you wouldn't still be out here. Then cut the throttle to 80%, she said. She did not look at him. If it's the fan, the note gets lower and stays smooth. If it's something answering, the flutter dies the second you leave its speed. It'll drop out all at once, not fade. Nobody moved. Do it, the man in charcoal said. The mechanic's jaw worked. He crouched, thumbed his tablet, and the note began to sink. It sank smooth for a breath, 2 breaths, and then the flutter underneath it did not sink with it. It simply stopped. One instant it was there, threading through the sound, and the next the air was clean, and the engine ran like an engine, and nothing answered it at all. Chloe let out a breath she had been keeping for a while. Huh, the mechanic said to his tablet. Bring it back up, she said, and this time he did it without being told, and the flutter came back exactly where it had left, snapping in at the same speed, gone again the moment he pulled off it. Twice more. In, out, the same speed every time, like a light with a switch. That's not damage spread through the whole assembly, she said. Damage everywhere gives you a mush. This is one thing. One bracket, one clamp, one mount, holding at every speed but this one. At this one it lets go a little, and shakes and grabs and lets go. Find the part that only fails at that number. She heard herself and stopped. She had said far too much. She could feel the shape of the mistake already, the size of the room she had just walked into with her father's ear and her cracked tablet and her 8 months left. I'm sorry, she said. The engine's not my business. I'll go. She set the empty tray on the cart, straightened the cups she had knocked crooked. Her hands were shaking now that the talking was done, small, at the knuckles, and she pressed them flat against her apron to make them behave. She turned to leave and got 4 steps toward the doors. Sesso. The word cracked across the hangar like a dropped tool. One of the still men moved for the first time, and she knew before she placed him that this was the broad one with the buzz cut and the flat, once broken nose, the one the maids called the boss's shadow. Sang-hoon crossed to the engine. He and the mechanic put their heads together over the tablet. The mechanic pointed at a line on the screen, and then at a place on the engine, and then at the line again, and Sang-hoon straightened and looked back across the hangar at Chloe with an expression she could not read and did not want to. Shut it down, the man in charcoal said. Open it. The engine died. In the sudden quiet, Chloe could hear her own pulse, and the scrape of the mechanic dragging a ladder, and the ratchet of a panel coming off. She should have been through the doors. She stood by the cart because leaving now felt like running, and running felt like guilt, and she had nothing to be guilty of except a good ear and a bad sense of timing. The mechanic went up the ladder with a light in his teeth. He reached into the open cowling. For a long moment there was only the small sounds of his hands working in metal. Then he said a word in Korean that Chloe did not know but understood perfectly, the way you understand a man who has just found the thing he swore was not there. He came down the ladder holding something in 2 fingers. A bracket, L-shaped, no longer than her hand. One of its 2 bolts turned freely in the hole. The metal around it had gone bright and powdered where it had been working itself loose against the seat, cycle after cycle, day after day, for who knew how long. He held it up into the white light. Everyone looked at it. It was such a small thing to have grounded a jet and pulled a mafia boss out of his bed before the sun. 1/3 of a turn on 1 bolt. Days of it. Whole flights of it. The fault chattering awake at altitude and going quiet again on approach, hiding from every hand that reached for it on the ground. 2 flights ago, the mechanic said, half to himself, doing the math backward. Maybe 3. It's been flying like this. He looked at the bright powdered metal where the bolt had walked itself loose. 1 more and it doesn't stay a note. Engine mount, the mechanic said quietly, like an apology of his own. Forward bracket, backed off maybe 1/3. At high fan it'd chatter and reseat. Anywhere else it'd hold. He turned it in his fingers. You'd never catch it on the ground cold. Only running. Only at speed. Sang-hoon looked at Chloe. The 2 suited men looked at Chloe. The man in charcoal set his untouched coffee down on the wing and looked at Chloe. She stared at the bracket because it was easier than any of them. What's your name? The man said. The whole point of a maid was to not have this moment. She had spent 8 months not having this moment, being the hand that set the tray down, the shape that closed the curtain, A black and white uniform moving along the edges of rooms that belonged to other people. Okja had told her the two clever ones before her had been sent home inside a season. She had promised to be furniture. She had lasted until the exact instant her father's ear proved louder than her own good sense. "Chloe," she said. "Chloe Ellsworth. You work in this house." Upstairs, the linens. Her voice found the flat servant's register on its own, the one that asked for nothing and offered less. "I brought the coffee. I'll go back to the linens." "How did you know that?" He nodded at the bracket without looking at it. That number, the 80%. She could feel the answer being the wrong size for a maid's mouth. She gave it anyway, small, because a smaller lie would have insulted the man, and she was too tired to build one. "My father fixed engines. He taught me to listen." True, and enough, and she left the rest folded up inside it, the years of it, the cracked tablet, the formulas she had been cramming at 5 in the morning about this exact thing, about the way a running machine finds the one part that agrees to shake with it. The man in charcoal watched her the way she watched an engine. She felt herself being turned over, checked at the seams, listened to. It was not the way men in that house usually looked at her, and it was worse for that, because there was nothing in it she knew how to duck. "Your father fixed engines," he said. "Cars. For 30 years. This is not a car." "No, sir." She let a breath go. "But shaking is shaking. It doesn't care what it's bolted to." Something moved at the corner of his mouth that was not quite anything. He picked the coffee back up off the wing and, for the first time, drank it. Then he turned to Sang-hoon and the mechanic and the two suits, and the morning came back into the room, orders and numbers, the aircraft schedule, who to call, and Chloe understood that her moment was over and she had survived it, and she should leave before it started again. She took the tray. She got as far as the doors. "Ellsworth." She stopped with her hand on the metal. "You'll bring the coffee tomorrow," he said. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the open engine, at the bright wound where the bracket had been. Not the housekeeper. "You?" "Sir, I have my—" "You'll bring the coffee." It was not a request, and it was not a kindness. She could hear that much. It was a man who had found an instrument he had not known was in his house, and did not intend to set it back on the shelf. She thought of Okja's face. She thought of the two clever girls. She thought of the wedding in 10 days and the woman arriving that afternoon who did not like clever staff, and of the $1,400 due on Friday, and of her name, which her mother had told her not 1 hour ago to keep clean and unowed in that house. "Yes, sir," she said, because there was no other word a maid could say, and she went out through the doors into the gray light before the sun, and the doors swung shut behind her, on the whole strange quiet of it. She did not remember climbing the service stairs. She came back into herself on the second landing with the empty tray against her chest and her heart going like the engine had gone, high and fast and finding things to shake. She stopped and put her back to the cold wall and made herself breathe. She had broken the one rule, not her father's rule. Okja's. She had been seen. Worse than seen, she had been useful, and useful was a kind of visible that did not wash out. "There you are." Okja was at the top of the stairs with a stack of pressed napkins over one arm and a face that had already decided to be angry to save time. "In, down, out. I said the words to you myself. You've been gone 20 minutes. 20. The whole west wing to open before she stopped. She looked at Chloe properly, at whatever was on her face, and the anger went somewhere else and got replaced by something older and more careful. "What happened down there?" Chloe opened her mouth to make it small. "The plane had a noise. She brought the coffee. It's fixed now." "They found the fault," she said instead. "It was a loose bracket on the engine mount. Backed off about a third of the way. It only let go at high power, so it read fine on the ground and shook itself apart in the air. That's why they couldn't find it." Okja stood very still on the top step. "And how," she said slowly, "do you know all of that, standing here on my staircase with an empty tray?" "Because I told them where to look." The napkins came down off Okja's arm and got set on the banister rail as though they had suddenly grown heavy. She came down 2 steps. She took Chloe's chin in her small dry hand, not unkindly, and turned her face toward the window light, and looked at her, the way you look at a child who has come home with a story that is going to cost the family something. "You told them," she said. He asked. I couldn't. Chloe pulled a breath. He heard me stop. He asked what I heard, and I could have lied, and I've been lying all morning. To my mother, to everybody, and I was tired. I told him the truth about a bracket. She laughed, once, with no funny in it. I told the truth about a bracket, Okja. That's the thing I couldn't hold in. Who asked you? Okja's voice had gone quiet in a way that was more frightening than shouting. Which man asked you? Chloe looked at her. The quiet one, Okja said. Not a question. He told me to bring the coffee tomorrow. Chloe heard the words leave her and felt the shape of them settle over the day like weather. Me, not you. He said it twice. For a long moment, the old woman did not say anything at all. Somewhere below them, the house was fully awake now. The clatter of the kitchen, a vacuum starting in a far room, the ordinary machinery of a rich morning. Above them, the west wing waited to be opened for a woman who would arrive after lunch and walk its rooms and decide who in this house was furniture and who was a problem. Okja let go of her chin. She picked her napkins back up off the rail. When she spoke again, her voice had flattened into the practical, which was how Chloe knew she was truly afraid. Listen to me. You did a clever thing, and clever things do not stay small in this house. They grow. By tonight, 3 people will have told the story, and by tomorrow, it will not be your story anymore. It will be theirs, and theirs will have edges. She started up the stairs, then stopped, and did not turn around. The lady of this house is coming today. If she hears that her husband-to-be pulled a maid into his hangar and kept her there, she will not ask what the maid said about a bracket. Do you understand me? She will not care about the bracket. I didn't do anything. I know you didn't. Okja went up one more step. That has never once been the part that mattered. Chloe stayed on the landing. Then tell me what to do. The old woman paused with her hand on the rail. Tomorrow you'll bring the coffee, because he told you to. And there is no version of this where you tell that man no. She said it flatly, a fact, not a comfort. You'll set it down. You'll say nothing you aren't asked. If he asks, you'll answer short. And you will not, ever, let it look like you enjoyed being in that room. I didn't enjoy it. Okja turned her head just enough to catch her over one shoulder, and her tired, sharp eyes did not believe that for a second. You've been dead behind the face for 8 months, girl. You came up those stairs with something living in it. I saw it before you said a word. She let that land. Put it away. She'll see it faster than I did. She went, and her keys sang at her waist all the way down the corridor, and Chloe was left alone on the landing with the empty tray and the gray light coming up and the memory of a small L-shaped piece of metal turning bright in a man's fingers. She should have felt afraid. Part of her, the sensible part her mother had built, was already doing the math of it, the way Seyrin's face would look, the way a story with edges could open a door and put her suitcase outside it. 8 months, $1,400. A name to keep clean. She had walked into a room she had no rank to enter, and she had come out marked, and marks did not wash. But under all of that, low, like a note beneath a note, there was another thing, and she was honest enough with herself on that cold staircase to hear it. For 20 minutes, she had not been the linens. She had not been the hand that set the tray down. She had stood in a room full of men who did this for a living, and she had heard the one thing they could not hear, and she had been right, and a bracket had come out of an engine to prove it. Her father had taught her to listen. She had listened, and for once in 8 months of being nobody's business, listening had been worth something out loud. She looked at her own hands. They had stopped shaking. Down in the hangar, though she would not learn this until much later, the man in charcoal stood over the open engine long after the others had scattered to their phones. He turned the bracket in his fingers. He thought about the maid who had walked in with coffee and named the fault in his aircraft in the time it took his own people to swear it could not be found. He set the bracket down on the wing next to the coffee she had poured. The one upstairs, he said to Sang-hoon without turning. The linens. What do we know? Nothing, sir. She's staff, American. Been here since the spring. Find out. And that was how it began. Not with a look, not with a want, but with a number under a note that only one person in the house could hear. Chloe climbed the last flight to the linen room and put the tray in its place and picked up the cracked tablet where she had left it face down on the ironing table and turned it over. The screen woke to the page she had been drowning in at 5 that morning. The diagrams and the equations, The whole science of a thing shaking itself to pieces because something nearby agreed to shake along. The last line of it came up ghost gray where the crack ate the pixels, the way it always did. She read it anyway. She knew it by heart. The carafe was already filled when Chloe reached the kitchen the next morning, and there was a folder sitting beside it that had not been there the day before. Manila, thin, no name on the tab. Okja stood over it with her arms crossed, keys quiet at her waist. That came up from the hangar at 4, Okja said. Sang-hoon left it, said it was for the girl who brings the coffee. Chloe did not touch it yet. She set the carafe straight, lined the paper cups, checked the seal on the lid the way she checked everything now, out of habit, out of survival. Then she looked at the folder. He wrote my job into a delivery, she said. He wrote you a door, Okja said. Doors close, child. Some of them lock behind you. She pushed the folder across the steel counter with 2 fingers, the way you move something you don't want your prints on. Take the coffee. The folder is yours. I saw nothing. Chloe carried both down the service stairs. She did not open the folder until she was inside the hangar, under the work lights, with the jet quiet on its jacks and the mechanic nowhere in sight. Taehyun was there, charcoal, sleeves down, a tablet in one hand and the opened engine cowling above him like a mouth. He did not turn when she came in. He let her set the coffee on the steel cart, pour, and stand. You read it? He said. Not yet. Read it now. She opened it. 3 pages. A fault report printed clean, with the forward mount bracket circled in red and a torque log beside it. Numbers ran down the right margin, the resonance band, the fan speed where the flutter woke, the reseat pattern. Someone had typed a question at the bottom in English. At what margin does this become unsafe rather than merely wrong? She understood the question. She understood that it was a test, and that the man had not looked at her once since she walked in. You want the number, she said. I want to know if you have one. Chloe set the folder on the cart next to the coffee. She thought about her father's voice, the pit behind the gas station, the way he made her say a thing plainly or not at all. She gave it plainly. A loose bracket isn't a countdown, she said. It's a coin. Every flight you flip it. Tighten inside spec. The coin's weighted. It lands right most times. Let it walk a third of a turn. The coin's fair. You already flew it fair 3 times. She tapped the torque log. The margin isn't a number, sir. It's how many more times you feel like gambling. For the first time, he turned his head. The koi at his collar caught the light, and she made herself not look at it. His eyes did the looking for both of them. That's not an engineer's answer, he said. It's my father's answer, she said. He fixed cars, not planes. But a bolt doesn't know what it's bolted to. You said that yesterday. It was true yesterday. Something moved at the corner of his mouth that was not quite anything. He set the tablet down. Drink your coffee, he said. And then, because that made no sense, no, mine, sit. She did not sit. There was no chair, and sitting was not a thing a maid did in a room with the man who owned the house. She stood with her hands folded and waited to be dismissed, the way Okja had drilled into her, in, down, out, feel nothing on your face. He watched her not sit. He seemed to file it somewhere. The bracket is replaced, he said. The part came at midnight. It flew a test circuit at dawn. Clean. The note is gone. He picked the folder back up and held it out to her. So this is the last report about that engine. She took it. Then why give it to me? Because there will be others, he said. This house has 40 engines. Cars, generators, the boat, the 2 jets, the well pump nobody has looked at in a year. All of them shake. You hear it. Nobody else in this house hears it. He said the next part without weight, which was how she learned to fear it. You'll get the reports. You'll bring the coffee. You'll tell me which ones are counting down. She held the folder against her apron. I'm staff, sir. You're the only person on this property who told me the truth before it cost me a wing. I clean linens for 8 more months. Then for 8 months you'll do both. She should have said yes, sir, and left. That was the whole of the job. Instead, her mouth moved on its own, her father's daughter. The well pump, she said. If nobody's looked at it in a year and it's the deep kind, it's not the pump you'll lose. It's the motor bearing. You'll hear it drop a note about a week before it seizes. Someone should listen to it Sunday. He looked at her a long moment. Sunday? He repeated. On the low speed. Cold. Before anyone runs a tap. He wrote something on the tablet. She watched him write down a thing she'd said, in his own hand, and a feeling went through her that she did not have a safe name for, so she gave it none. She poured the last of the coffee to have somewhere to put her hands. Go, he said, not unkind. The lady arrives after lunch. Be upstairs. The word, lady, landed between them like a dropped tool. Chloe set the carafe down, gathered the folder, and left the way she came. She did not look back. But at the top of the service stair she stopped, one hand on the rail, and let herself feel exactly 1 second of the thing she had no name for. Then she folded it up and put it where she kept the watch. The reports kept coming. Not every day. Every second or third. A folder in the kitchen at 4. Sang-hoon's flat hand delivering it. Okja pretending it was linen. The boat's port engine ran hot on 1 cylinder. The backup generator hunted under load. The Sunday well pump had, in fact, dropped a note. Sang-hoon found the bearing scored and swapped the motor before it froze, and the folder that week had a single line typed at the bottom. No question this time. You were right about the pump. Chloe read it twice and put it in the pocket with the zipper, the inside one, the one she kept the watch money list in. She stopped bringing only the answer. She started bringing the question back sharpened. Why does the generator hunt only above 60%? She wrote in the margin in her ghost gray pencil. Because the governor's chasing a load it can't see. Look at what switches on at 60. It was the pool heater. It was always the pool heater. He had it moved to its own circuit and the hunting stopped, and no folder came that week, which she understood, now, was its own kind of answer. The coffee got longer. That was the part she could not account for later. The first mornings he took the cup and dismissed her inside a minute. Then a minute became 5, because he'd ask a follow-up and she'd answer, and he'd ask another. Then 5 became the whole time the coffee stayed hot, because he stopped pretending the questions were only about engines. Where did you learn the math? He asked one morning. The boat report lay between them, solved. Not the ear, the math. You wrote a modal frequency on the margin. Farm mechanics don't write modal frequencies. School, she said. What school? She weighed it. The whole house did not know. Okja half knew. Her mother knew, and worried. This man could end her contract with a sentence, and a woman who studied engineering was not furniture, was exactly the clever staff Se-rin sent away. But he had written her words in his own hand, and a lie told to a man who checks things is a debt that comes due at the worst hour. Aeronautics, she said. Aeronautical engineering. 8 months from the degree. I clean houses so I can finish it. He was quiet. The jet ticked as it cooled behind them. You bring me fault reports on my aircraft, he said slowly, and you are 8 months from being licensed to sign them. I'm 8 months from being allowed to want to. Why here, he said. Why my house? There are labs. Internships. You have the ear and the math. Her jaw set. This was the part she did not perform for anyone, not Okja, not her mother. Internships don't wire $1,400 to a bursar by Friday, she said. Labs don't cover my mother's rent when it comes out on the 14th. A house pays weekly and lets me study at 5 in the morning. I did the math on that too, sir. It's the only equation in my life that balances. She had said too much. She knew it the way you know you've over-torqued a bolt. The half-turn passed where it wanted to stop. She reached for the carafe to leave. Sit, he said. There's no chair. He pulled a rolling stool from under the bench with his foot and pushed it across the concrete to her. It stopped at her feet. She looked at the stool. She looked at him. She did not sit. I stand when I'm working, she said. I clean when I'm working. If I sit down in this hangar and someone opens that door, I'm not clever staff who fixed your plane. I'm a maid who forgot her place. You know which story runs faster in this house. He left the stool where it was. He did not push it away, and he did not make her take it, and that, the leaving of a choice on the floor between them, was the most dangerous thing he had done yet. You've thought about how this looks, he said. I think about how everything looks. It's the whole job. It's the only job under the job. He nodded, slow, like she'd handed him a reading he could not unsee on a gauge. The generator report was the one where he asked the wrong question, and she answered it anyway. "What would you build?" he said. "Not the folder, not the governor." The paper lay solved between them, and he set his coffee down and asked it flat, the way he asked everything, so she couldn't tell if it was small talk or a knife. If money weren't the equation, if you weren't 8 months from anything, what would Chloe Ellsworth build? She almost gave him the safe answer. She almost said, "I don't think like that, sir." But the hangar at 5 in the morning was the only room in her life where she wasn't furniture, and a woman gets careless in the one warm room. "Landing gear," she said. He waited. "Everyone wants the engine," she said. "The engine's glory. The engine's the poster. Nobody grows up dreaming about the strut that takes 40 tons at 140 knots and folds up into a box and doesn't complain." She turned the coffee cup a quarter, an engineer's fidget. "My father fixed the parts nobody thanks. Brakes, bearings, the stuff that only gets noticed when it fails. He used to say the whole car is a monument to the driver, and the mechanic keeps the monument standing and never signs it. I'd build the part that keeps the monument standing. The gear, the thing that catches the whole weight at the worst second and holds." "That's not ambition," he said. "That's your father again." "It's both," she said. "You can want a thing because it's yours and because it was his. The two don't fight. That's the part rich men get wrong about people like me. You think we have to choose between the dream and the debt. We carry both up the same stair." He was quiet a while. When he spoke, it was not about her. "I wanted to build ports," he said. She looked up. "Before this." He gestured at the hangar, the jet, the house above them, the whole apparatus of a life. "Civil work. Harbors. My father had other plans. There was a structure already in place when I was 9, a future that was chosen. I signed the monitored note on it and kept signing." He picked his coffee back up. "So you see, I understood the corrosion metaphor. I've lived in it since before you were born." "You're 36, she said. "I'm 24. You weren't born before me by that much, sir." The barest thing moved at his mouth again. "No," he said. "I suppose I wasn't." She should have left it there, but she was her father's daughter, and her father finished a diagnosis. "The difference," she said, "is I still get to build the gear. You gave up the ports." She gathered the carafe. "That's not a thing money fixes. That's the one thing your money can't buy back, and I think you know it, and I think that's why you keep a maid on the stair who tells you the truth. Because everyone you paid stopped a long time ago." He let her get to the door before he answered. "The ports weren't the merger's price," he said. "The merger is the price of never building them. Remember that when you hear the lady's name in this house." She didn't turn. "It's not my business, sir." "No," he agreed, "but you're the only one I'd tell it to." She went up the stair. She felt it for 1 second at the top. She folded it. She put it away. The blueprints came out on the 4th week. Not fault reports, plans. Taehyun was buying a light jet, a used one, and the broker had sent a folder thick as a phone book, and he spread it across the hangar bench under the work lights and said, without preamble, "Tell me what they're hiding." Chloe washed her hands at the utility sink first. She dried them on her apron. Then she leaned over the paper, and for a while there was no house, no uniform, no $1,400, no lady arriving after lunch. There was only the aircraft, opened flat on the table, and the two of them reading it. She found 3 things: a logbook gap of 11 months with no explanation, which meant either a hangar sitting or a repair someone didn't want written down, a replaced spar cap on the left wing, legal, documented, but paired with no matching inspection of the right, which was the tell, and a corrosion note in a control run that had been signed off monitored 4 times, which meant nobody had actually fixed it, they just kept agreeing to look at it later. "That one," she said, tapping the corrosion note, "that's your walking bolt. It's not wrong yet, it's counting." He stood close over the same sheet. Their shoulders were not touching, their hands were on the same page, hers pointing, his flat, and the light made one shadow of the two of them across the blueprint. "You'd walk away from the airframe," he said. "I'd walk away from the cellar," she said. "Different thing, the plane's fine. The man's lying to you about the plane. You buy from a man who tells you about the corrosion. You never buy from a man who signs monitored 4 times. She straightened. "My father wouldn't sell you a car. He wouldn't drive his own daughter in. Some men will." You learn which is which before you learn the engine. Your father taught you engines and integrity in the same lesson. Same lesson, she said. He'd have hated that I clean houses. He'd have hated worse that I lied to a rich man to keep the peace. So I don't. She met his eyes. That's not for you. That's for him. The air in the hangar had changed, and they both felt it, and neither named it. And that was the moment she chose to draw the line, because a line drawn late is not a line, it's an apology. She stepped back from the bench. She put the width of a full body between them. She folded her hands. I'm going to say a thing, sir, she said, and then I'm going to keep bringing the coffee, because I need the 8 months. But I'm going to say it once, clearly, so it's on the record between us, and neither of us has to wonder. He went still, the stillness of a man who already knows the shape of a sentence before it's spoken. Say it, he said. You're getting married in 5 days, Chloe said. The lady is upstairs in this house choosing flowers. Whatever this is, the reports, the coffee, the plane on the table, it's engines, that's all it's allowed to be. I don't build anything on another woman's foundation. I won't be a name whispered in a house I clean. I won't be the reason a bride's face falls at her own wedding. Her voice held level. It cost her to hold it level. I've got exactly one thing that's mine in this world, and it isn't money. It's my name. I don't put it under yours, or beside hers, or in anybody's mouth. Not for a folder, not for a well pump, not for you. The work lights hummed. Somewhere above them, a floor creaked with the weight of the house waking to the wedding. I didn't ask you for anything, he said. It came out low. You pushed a stool across the floor, she said. You didn't have to ask. That's how I know I had to say it. She waited to be fired. She had said the unsayable thing to the man who owned her contract, and she waited for the sentence that ended 8 months and $1,400 and the balanced equation, and she found, standing there, that she'd rather lose the job than lose the line, her father's daughter to the last bolt. Taehyun did not fire her. He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his face that had been shut since before she met him opened 1 degree and then closed again. Han Se-rin, he said, not to her, to the blueprint. That's the name of the bride. I know her name, sir. Do you know it's a merger? He said, and stopped himself, and she watched him decide not to hand a maid his whole life across a workbench, and she respected him more for the stopping than she would have for the telling. It's not my business, she said gently. That's the whole point of what I just said. Your marriage isn't a folder. I don't get a margin on it. I don't get an opinion. She gathered the coffee things. I'll bring the reports as long as you want reports. I'll tell you which engines are counting down. But the line I drew stays where I drew it, and I'll thank you to leave the stool under the bench from now on. He almost smiled. It was the barest thing. You're the only person in this house who's ever told me where a line is. Everybody else is scared of you, she said, folding the carafe into the crook of her arm. I'm scared of Friday. It's a different fear. It doesn't bend the same way. She turned to go. She had the folder, the blueprint corrosion still circled in her gray pencil, and she'd said the thing, and it was done, and she'd survived it. She reached the hangar doors. Ellsworth. She stopped. She didn't turn all the way. Sir. The corrosion note, he said. You said a man who signs monitored 4 times is lying to himself that he'll fix it later. Yes. I've signed a few of those, he said, not on planes. She stood in the doorway with the light of the waking house ahead of her and the work lights behind, and she understood that he was not talking about aircraft, and she did the kindest and hardest thing she knew, which was to pretend she hadn't understood at all. Then fix it or fly it, sir, she said. But don't keep signing it. Bolts don't care what they're bolted to, neither do the years, and she went up the service stair, one hand on the rail, and did not let herself feel the thing until she reached the top, and then she felt it for 1 second, and folded it, and put it away with the watch. Okja was waiting at the linen room with a face like a closed drawer. You were down there 40 minutes, she said. Blueprints, Chloe said. He's buying a plane. He wanted a second pair of eyes. He has men for eyes. He has men who tell him what he wants. Chloe set the folder on the shelf, spine in, the way she hid everything now. I tell him what's true. That's the whole reason he keeps me on the stair. Okja came in and shut the door, which she never did. She stood close and dropped her voice under the sound of the house. Listen to me, child, and don't put your clever face on. The lady's assistant walked the West Wing this morning with a list. She counted staff. She asked which of us goes downstairs and when. The old woman's watchful eyes did not blink. She asked about you by name. She had it written down. Chloe. The one from the linens. Somebody told her the boss changed who brings his coffee. Chloe's hands went still on the shelf. I said what's true and nothing else, Okja said. I said you brought coffee because the housekeeper was short-handed the morning the plane broke. I did not say you fixed the plane. I did not say 40 minutes. But child, the assistant writes things down, and the lady reads them, and the lady is not marrying that man for love. She's marrying him for the merger, same as he's marrying her. And a woman in a loveless deal watches the only warm thing in the house like a hawk watches a field. There's nothing warm to watch, Chloe said. I drew the line myself, 10 minutes ago, in that hangar, to his face. Okja looked at her, the way you look at someone who thinks a drawn line stops a fire. You drew a line for you, she said. You didn't draw one for her, and you didn't draw one for what people say. Lines you draw don't live in your mouth, child. They live in other people's, and other people's mouths have already started. She opened the door again, back to normal, keys chiming. Bring the coffee tomorrow if he asks. But keep your face dead as a Sunday, and pray the lady's wedding comes before her assistant finishes that list. She left. Chloe stood alone in the linen room with the reports hidden spine in and the blueprint corrosion circled in gray, and the line she'd drawn still warm in her mouth. She took out her cracked tablet. She turned it to the page she'd written the modal frequency on, the one he'd asked about. The last line came up ghost gray where the crack ate the pixels. She read it anyway. Then she turned the tablet face down, because for the first time in 8 months, the numbers weren't the thing she was afraid of. Downstairs, in the hangar, Taehyun stood over the blueprint with the corrosion circled in a maid's gray pencil, and did not send for Song-hoon, and did not sign the note that would end it or the note that would keep it, and stood there long past the time the coffee had gone cold. Se-rin came down the service stairs because the elevator was too slow for what she wanted to see. Ji-woo had said one word in the car that morning, hangar, and then a second word, again, and Se-rin had not touched her coffee since. She followed the smell of jet fuel and cold concrete to the bottom of the house, to a bay she had never once entered in 3 years of coming here, and she stopped at the seam of the open doors. Inside, her fiancé stood over a sheet of paper the size of a table. He was not alone. The maid was beside him, not behind him, not across the bench with the width of a room between them. Beside him, shoulder near his shoulder, a pencil in her brown hand, and she was pointing at something on the paper, and she was laughing. Taehyun was laughing too. Low, almost nothing, the kind of sound Se-rin had been trying to earn out of him at 9 dinners in a row. She had earned silence. This girl had earned the sound. Se-rin did not step in. She counted the inches between the two of them, and the count came out too small, and something old and cold turned over in her chest. Not the thing the magazines would call jealousy, because there was no love in this house to be jealous of. It was the other thing. The thing a woman feels when she has signed her name to a merger and watches the collateral prefer someone else. She backed up 1 step, into the dark of the stairwell, and she watched a while longer, and she memorized the girl's face. Then she went up to plan. By the time Chloe climbed the service stairs an hour later, the West Wing had changed shape. Okja met her on the landing with her mouth pressed flat. New orders, she said, from the lady's assistant, written down. She held out a single folded sheet, and her hand was not quite steady. Chloe opened it. Ji-woo's handwriting was small and even, the way a spreadsheet is even. Effective today, the maid Chloe Ellsworth is reassigned from upstairs linen and morning service to the West Guest Wing, floors and glass, under direct supervision. She will not carry to the vehicle bay. She will not enter the West sitting rooms while the household is present. Hours as posted. Chloe read it twice. The second time she read the last line, the one that had no reason to be there. Any deviation is grounds for dismissal without reference. Without reference, she said out loud. I know, Okja said. The words landed in the part of Chloe's mind that did arithmetic without being asked. 8 months. $1,400. A degree with her father's ear built into it. And now a sentence, written by a stranger, that could turn all of it into a girl who was let go and nobody would say why. Floors and glass, Chloe said, in the guest wing. It's the wing they're putting the flowers in, Okja said quietly. For the wedding. She wants you where she can see you. On your knees, where she can see you. Chloe folded the paper back along its crease. Her hands did the folding very carefully, because if they did anything carefully, she could keep them from doing anything else. Then I'll clean the glass, she said. The guest wing had a wall of windows 2 floors tall, and Chloe was given a bucket, a squeegee, and no ladder tall enough. She worked the lower panes on her knees on a folded towel, and above her the household moved back and forth carrying white peonies and stem cutters and rolls of ribbon, and none of them looked down, which was its own kind of looking. Se-Rin arrived at 11. She came in on the heels of the florist, ivory suit, low chignon, a phone in one hand she did not use. She walked the length of the glass wall, as if inspecting the flowers, and she stopped at the pane Chloe was working, and she looked at the glass, not the girl. There's a streak, Se-Rin said. Chloe looked. There was no streak. The pane was clean enough to fall through. Yes, ma'am, Chloe said. She wiped it again anyway. You're the one who reads, Se-Rin said. Still to the glass, the one from the airplane, Baikok told me, the maid who fixed the airplane. A small breath through the nose. Do you know how that sounds? In a house? A maid who fixes the airplane the boss flies in? I brought coffee, ma'am, Chloe said. The mechanic fixed the airplane. Se-Rin turned, then. She looked down, and her eyes were the cool, downturned kind that did not warm when the rest of the face arranged itself. You're going to be careful, she said, and quiet, and invisible, until my wedding is over. And then you're going to be gone. Do you understand what I'm giving you? I'm giving you a way to leave that doesn't end your little school. She let that sit. For now. Chloe kept her eyes on the squeegee. Yes, ma'am. Se-Rin let a silence open. Above them, a florist crossed the mezzanine with an armful of peonies, and a petal fell 2 floors and landed on the wet glass between them, and neither woman looked at it. You think I'm cruel, Se-Rin said. It was almost curious. You think I woke up wanting to put a girl on her knees on my wedding floor? She crouched, once, so her face came level with Chloe's, close, the pearls at her throat swinging forward. I have wanted one thing since I was your age, a place that couldn't be taken from me. Do you know how a woman gets one of those, in my family? She trades for it. She becomes useful to a man who needs what her name is worth. Her voice stayed even. I have paid for that place with every year I have, and I am not going to lose it to a maid who makes him laugh over a piece of paper. Chloe understood then that the woman above her was not a cartoon. She was a person who had also done the arithmetic of her one life and gotten a colder answer. I'm not trying to take anything, ma'am, Chloe said. I clean glass, I finish my degree, I leave. No, Se-Rin said, standing, the softness folding back into the suit. You don't get to be the good one. Not in my house. Look at me when the lady of the house speaks to you. Chloe looked up. She let her face be what Okja had told her to make it. Furniture, dead behind the eyes. And she held it, and it cost her more than the woman standing over her would ever know. Se-Rin studied it. Then something crossed her face that was almost disappointment, as if she had wanted the girl to flinch and give her a reason. Finish the wall, she said, and walked away in heels that struck the marble like a metronome. Jiwoo stayed behind for a moment, tablet against her chest, gold-rimmed glasses catching the light. She looked at Chloe on the towel, on her knees, and she wrote something with her thumb, and she smiled a small closed smile, and then she followed her lady out. Chloe finished the wall. She finished it perfectly, every pane, because the only thing left that was hers was how well she did the thing they gave her to do. At 2 o'clock, Jiwoo came to the west wing alone. Chloe was polishing the long console under the windows, a strip of dark wood with nothing on it but a lamp and a shallow silver dish. Jiwoo walked past her once, tablet up, not looking, and then she stopped at the console, and she opened her nude handbag as if to check her phone. Chloe was 6 feet away with her back half turned. She heard the small sound. She did not know yet that it was a sound she would need to remember. A soft click, metal on wood, quick, and the handbag closing. Carry on, Jiwoo said, to no one, and left. Chloe turned back to the console. In the shallow silver dish, Where there had been nothing, there was now a bracelet. Diamonds. A line of them in white gold, cold and exact, worth more than the wire her mother needed on Friday, and the tuition and the watch in the sock, and a year of everything Chloe had. It sat in the dish, as if it had always sat there. Chloe's first move was toward it, the reflex of a person who cleans, who tidies, who returns things to their owners. Her hand stopped an inch above it. 8 months in this house had taught her one thing under all the others, and it surfaced now, fast and cold. A thing that appears where a thing should not be is not a gift. Okja had said it in 100 different ways. The smart ones don't last. The story grows edges. Chloe pulled her hand back. She stood up. She looked at the bracelet in the dish and she made herself understand, standing very still on the towel, exactly what it was and exactly what it was for. If she picked it up, she was a thief holding a bracelet. If she left it and walked away, she was a thief who hid it in the dish and got caught. If she called for someone, she was a maid standing over jewelry that appeared out of nowhere, and her word against theirs, without reference. There was no move on the board that did not end with her name on the wrong side of it. She stood there, and she did the thing her father taught her, which was to stop and listen and find the one part that was actually broken. And the broken part was not the bracelet. The broken part was that she was alone in the room with it, and only her word to say she had not touched it. So she did not touch it. She crossed to the wall, and she took her phone out of her apron, the cheap phone with the taped corner, and she did not photograph the bracelet, because a photograph could be taken any time from anywhere and proved nothing. Instead, she looked up, along the crown molding where the wing met the ceiling, and she found what she had cleaned around all morning without letting herself think about it. A small black dome. A camera. One of Sang-hoon's. Chloe looked at it. She let it look at her. Then she stepped back from the console, both hands open and empty at her sides, and she stood where the lens could see her hands, and the dish, and the distance between them, and she waited, and she did not go near the bracelet again. That is where they found her. Se-rin came in first, then Ji-woo, a half step behind, and then, because a scene needs a witness with authority, Okja, summoned up from the kitchen by a bell she had not rung. There, Ji-woo said, pointing at the dish. I noticed it was gone from the lady's case after lunch. She let her voice climb into worry. I hoped I was wrong. Se-rin walked to the console. She looked at the bracelet in the dish. She looked at the maid standing 6 feet from it with her hands open, and for 1/2 second, something flickered, because the girl was not clutching it, was not running, was not crying, was standing there like a person who had already worked out the whole shape of the trap and decided not to step in it. Explain this, Se-rin said. I can't, ma'am, Chloe said. It wasn't there when I started the console. Then it was. It walked into the dish. No, ma'am. Someone put it there. Chloe kept her hands where they were. I haven't touched it. You can see I haven't touched it. I can see a maid alone with my diamonds, Se-rin said. Okja stepped forward, small and gray and shaking now, with something that was not fear. This girl has been in this house since spring, she said. She's never so much as kept a hairpin. Nobody asked you, Se-rin said, without looking at her, and Okja's mouth closed. Ji-woo already had her tablet up, thumb moving. Security should handle it, she said smoothly. Chain of custody. So there's no question later. She was writing dismissal without reference into the air with every word, and she knew it, and she was enjoying the neatness of it. Yes, Se-rin said. Call Seo. Let's do this properly. Let's have it on record. And that was the mistake, though none of them knew it yet, because the one thing Chloe had wanted from the moment her hand stopped over the dish was exactly this. For someone with more power than her to insist, out loud, on the record. Sang-hoon came in 3 minutes later. Black jacket, earpiece, the flat once-broken nose, the heavy-lidded calm. He looked at the bracelet. He looked at Chloe. He looked, longest, at where she was standing, and at her open hands, and something moved behind his face that did not reach it. You want it on record, he said to Se-rin. Not a question. Then we pull the record. Pull whatever you like, Se-rin said. She was alone in the room. She was, Sang-hoon agreed. The room has a camera. He touched his earpiece, said a name and a time, and the wing went quiet, except for the far-off snip of the florist's shears. On and on, cutting stems that no longer mattered. They moved to the security room, all of them, because Se-rin would not let the scene out of her sight, and because Sang-hoon would not carry the footage to her. He made her come to it. 2 monitors, a wall of small feeds, a chair he did not offer anyone. He scrubbed the West Wing console camera back. The timestamp ran in the corner in white. There was Chloe, on her knees at the glass wall. There was the console, clean, the silver dish empty. There was the morning, sped up, the household carrying flowers, and Chloe never once crossing to the console until she was told to polish it. "Slow it there," Sang-hoon said to himself, "and let it run at speed." There was Chloe at the console with her cloth. There was the dish, empty, in front of her the whole time. And there, the timestamp reading 9 minutes before anyone had come running, there was Ji-woo Baek, walking past, stopping, opening the nude handbag, and in a motion so quick it was almost nothing, a motion Chloe had heard as a single soft click and not understood, setting the bracelet into the dish and closing the bag and walking on, tablet up, not looking, exactly as innocent as a woman can look when a lens is watching her do the one thing she thinks no one will ever see. The security room was very quiet. Sang-hoon let the frame sit. Ji-woo, frozen on the monitor, her thumb still on the clasp of her own bag. Then he turned in the chair, not fast, and he looked at the real Ji-woo, the one standing by the door with her tablet suddenly lowered, and he did not say anything at all, which was worse than if he had. "That's," Ji-woo started, "that's not the angle." "It's the only angle in the room," Sang-hoon said. "You picked the room." He scrubbed it back and played it again, slower this time, the way a man reruns a test to be sure the flutter comes in at the same rotation. The hand, the click, the dish. Again, Ji-woo watched herself do it twice, and the second time was worse than the first, because the first time a person can still tell herself it might not be what it looks like, and the second time there is no telling left. "Stop it," Ji-woo said. "Please stop it." He did not stop it. He let it loop, her own hand betraying her on a wall of small screens, and the only sound in the room was the far-off snip of the florist and the soft tick of the file starting over. Se-rin was looking at the monitor. She was looking at her own assistant, framed and still, doing the thing on Se-rin's order that Se-rin had been careful never to say out loud, and Chloe watched the woman's face and saw the exact moment the shape of it changed. Not to shame, Se-rin was not built for shame, but to calculation. To the cold arithmetic of a person who had just watched her clean plan turn into a recording with her fingerprints 1 degree away from it. "Delete it," Se-rin said, quietly. Sang-hoon looked at her. "You heard me. It's a household matter. Delete the file." "The boss," Sang-hoon said, "asked me 3 weeks ago to find out everything about the maid in the linens." He let the name land where it needed to. "This is part of finding out. It goes to him." "It goes nowhere," Se-rin said, and her voice climbed for the first time, 1 notch, the metronome slipping. "Do you understand who I am in this house?" "In 5 days," Sang-hoon said, "not today." He stood up. He was a head taller than everyone in the room, and he used it the way a wall uses being a wall. He looked at Chloe, and for the first time all day someone in the house looked at her like a person instead of a piece on a board. "You didn't touch it," he said. "No, sir," Chloe said. "You stood where the camera could see your hands." It was not a question either. On purpose. Chloe held his eyes. "My father taught me," she said. "When something's wrong and everybody's about to blame the nearest part, you stop moving and you let them look. The shaking isn't always where the noise is." Sang-hoon looked at her a moment longer. Then he did something Chloe would turn over in her mind for a long time after. He nodded. Once. The way a man nods at another man who has read the same manual he has. "Go back to your work," he said. "Not the guest wing. Your own work. Upstairs." He looked at Se-rin when he said it, and the reassignment came undone in the air between them, without anyone signing a thing. Ji-woo made a small sound and did not finish it. Chloe walked out of the security room on legs that held, past Se-rin, who did not look at her now, past Ji-woo, who could not, and she climbed the service stairs, and she did not let her hands start shaking until she was on the landing, alone, with the door of the linen room shut behind her. Then they shook. Hard, both of them, the whole storm she had held flat for 4 hours arriving at once now that it was safe to arrive. She sat down on the low stool by the shelving, and she put her head down, and she breathed until the count came back. In for 4, hold for 4, the way you settle an engine that's been run too hot. Her phone was still in her apron, the cheap one with the taped corner, and she thought about calling her mother, and she did not, because there was no version of the sentence a bracelet appeared in a dish, and a woman tried to make me a thief that would fit inside her mother's chest without doing damage to it. Friday was still Friday. The wire was still due. The only thing that had changed was that she now knew what the house was willing to spend to be rid of her, and it was more than she made in a year, laid in a silver dish like it was nothing. She had won. She knew she had won. The footage cleared her. Sang-hoon had said, "Go back to your work." And yet the winning felt exactly like standing in a hallway where a bracelet could appear in a dish at any hour of any day, and where the only thing between her and a story with edges was one small black dome in the ceiling that might not be there next time. Downstairs, the footage did not get deleted. Sang-hoon walked it to the hanger himself, because some things do not go over a wire. He found Taehyun where he always was now before the wedding, in the bay with the machines that could be fixed, standing over a blueprint with a maid's gray pencil marks still on it. "You wanted to know about the linens girl," Sang-hoon said, and set the tablet on the bench and pressed play. Taehyun watched it once. The whole thing, the empty dish, the girl on her knees, the 9 minutes, Jiwoo's hand, the click, and then the girl standing back, hands open, choosing not to touch the thing that would have hanged her, choosing instead to stand where the lens could witness that she had not. A maid solving the trap the same cold, clean way she solved the engine, by finding the one part that was actually broken and refusing to move it. He watched Se-rin, on the small screen, say delete it. He did not say anything for a while. "She asked you to erase it," he said finally. "Yes. And you brought it to me." "You gave the order first," Sang-hoon said. 3 weeks ago. Find out." He picked the tablet back up. "So I found out." He held the boss's eyes a moment, the way he'd held the girl's. She never came near it. Not the bracelet, not you either. Not the way the lady thinks. "I've watched all of it now. Every morning in this bay." He set the tablet down again, face up, Jiwoo frozen on it. "The one drawing lines in this house isn't the one your fiancé's trying to frame." Taehyun looked at the blueprint under his hands. The corrosion the girl had circled 4 days ago. The note somebody had signed, monitored 4 times without ever fixing the thing underneath it. He had been standing over it for 4 days, signing nothing. "Leave the file," he said. Sang-hoon left the file. He left the hanger. And Taehyun stood alone over 2 records at once. The drawing that told him what a coward does with a wall that's rotting, and the recording that told him what his marriage really was, dressed in ivory, giving quiet orders to plant diamonds on the one person in his house who had never once asked him for anything. He did not send for Se-rin. He did not send for the girl. He stood there long past the time the light in the bay went from work white to the gray of late afternoon, and for the first time in a life that had been structured since he was 9 years old, the note in front of him was not one he could keep signing and keep flying. Upstairs, Chloe's hands went still at last. She turned over the cracked tablet on her knee, and the last line came up ghost gray the way it always did, and she read it, and she did not read the numbers on it, because the numbers were not the thing anymore. The thing was a bracelet in a dish, and 4 days until a wedding, and a house that had just told her, as plainly as a house can, that being right was not going to be enough to keep her safe in it. She turned the tablet face down on her knee, and she looked at the shut door, and she began, quietly, without deciding it yet, the way you first hear a bearing drop a single note a week before it ceases, to do the arithmetic of leaving. The arithmetic did not take long. It never did, once she stopped pretending the numbers were something other than what they were. Chloe sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the staff room, tablet face down beside her, and counted on the flat of her hand the way her father had taught her to count torque passes, 1 finger at a time, out loud almost, so she could not skip the ugly middle steps. 8 months to the degree, 4 days to a wedding, 1 bracelet in a silver dish worth more than a year of her wage, put there to end her, a camera that had cleared her, and a house that had watched itself try to break her and had only stopped because a man with an earpiece decided the boss came before the bride. That was the part that would not sit still. She had not been saved. She had been kept. There was a difference, and her father had a name for it, and the name was borrowed time. She stood, crossed to the small window that looked out over the service court, where two of the catering vans had already backed in for the tastings, white peony boxes stacked against the wall like cargo. Somewhere below her, the house was rehearsing a wedding. Somewhere above her, a man was standing over a blueprint he still had not signed. And she was here, in the middle, in a room the size of a closet, holding the only thing that had ever been fully hers. Her name. She said it to herself once. Chloe Ellsworth. The way her mother said it. The way her father had said it over an engine, wiping his hands. This is my girl. She can hear a bearing die a week out. Then she pulled the suitcase from under the bed. She did it before she could argue. That was the trick with a seized part. You did not warm it up and try again. You did not baby it. You cut the power and you took it out. Reasoning it took time, and time was the one thing that always turned around and cost you. The suitcase was soft-sided, cheap, the zipper repaired once with a paperclip she had bent into a pull. It held everything she had brought into this house 8 months ago and almost nothing she had gained since. 2 off-work dresses, the cracked tablet and its charger. A folder of printed formulas, corners soft from handling. The phone with the taped corner. A photograph of her father in the yard behind the gas station, squinting, a wrench in his fist like a handshake. And, in the toe of a rolled sock, the steel watch. She held it for a moment in the flat morning light. Turned it over. The back was worn smooth where 30 years of his wrist had ridden it. She had come here planning to sell it. $900 in overtime, $500 for the watch, and the $1,400 would close, and she would owe this house nothing. She was not selling it now. Selling it now meant she still needed something from these people, that some door had to stay open, that some favor could still be asked. And she was done asking. She put the watch back in the sock, and the sock in the shoe, and the shoe in the case, and she zipped it, and the paperclip held. Then she sat down and wrote the resignation. She wrote it by hand, on a sheet from the folder, on the blank back of a page of resonance equations, because that felt right somehow. The numbers on one side, the goodbye on the other. She kept it short. Her father used to say a long apology was just fear wearing a suit. She thanked the household for 8 months of steady work. She said she was resigning effective immediately, of her own choosing, for reasons of her own, and that no one had asked her to go. She underlined that last part twice. She did not fully understand yet why it mattered so much to write it down. She would understand later. She signed it. Chloe Ellsworth. Full name. The way you sign a fault report you are willing to stand behind. Then she went to find Okja. The old woman was in the linen room, of all places, folding pillow slips that were already folded, which was what Okja did with her hands when her head was somewhere loud. She looked up when the door opened, and she saw the suitcase and her hands stopped. No, Okja said. Okja. No. You listen to me now. The keys at her waist rang once as she turned. That footage cleared you. In front of the lady. In front of CO. You are clean in this house today in a way you have never been clean. You walk out now, and you throw that away with both hands. I'm not throwing it away. Chloe set the case down by the door, gently, the way you set down something you have already decided about. I'm keeping it. That's the whole point. Okja came around the folding table. She was small, and she had to look up to hold Chloe's eyes, and she did it anyway, the way she had for 8 months. The only person in this house who had ever looked up at her instead of through her. 3 days, Okja said. The wedding is in 3 days. You survive 3 days. The house empties, the lady is married and gone to her own wing and her own life, and you keep your wage and your record and your reference. 3 days, and then in the spring you have your paper, and you never think of this place again. 3 days, child. I can't give them 3 days. Why? Because it isn't 3 days. Chloe kept her voice level. Her father again. You do not raise your voice at a machine, you listen to it. It's 3 days until the wedding, and then it's however long until the next bracelet. There's always a next bracelet, Okja. You told me that yourself. The clever ones don't last in this house. You were right. I just found out how they make sure of it. Okja's mouth worked. She had no answer for her own warning coming back. She put a year of my life in a dish, Chloe said, to be rid of me. And the only reason it didn't work is that a man decided I was still useful to another man. That's not being saved. That's being kept on the shelf. And I didn't come halfway around the world and clean this floor at 5 in the morning to be a thing that gets kept on a shelf until the shelf gets tired of me. The keys rang again as Okja's hand found them, an old habit, a rosary made of iron. He'll ask for you, she said quietly. Tomorrow, the coffee, he'll ask. Then you'll bring it. Chloe reached into her apron and drew out the folded resignation and held it out. I need you to give him this, not today, after I'm gone. When he asks where I am. Okja did not take it. Read it first, Chloe said. So you know I didn't write anything that touches him. I didn't. It's clean. It just says I chose it. Okja took the paper, unfolded it with 2 fingers. Read it, her lips moving over the English the way they moved over her keys. Chloe watched the old woman's eyes go down the page and stop at the underlined line and go still. You wrote it twice, Okja said, that no one asked you. Because someone's going to say I was sent away. Chloe's throat pulled tight for the first time and she pushed through it. After I'm gone, someone's going to say the maid was dismissed, the maid stole, the maid got what was coming, and I want it written somewhere, in my own hand, that I walked. That's the only thing I get to keep out of this house. Not the wage, the story. Okja folded the paper back along its creases, slowly, and pressed the fold flat with her thumb, the way she pressed a collar. You are your father's, she said. God help you. He'd have left yesterday. A sound came out of Okja that was almost a laugh and almost the other thing. She put the resignation into the pocket of her housekeeping dress and buttoned the pocket, which Chloe had never seen her do. Then Chloe took the keys off her own belt. 2 of them. The service stair, the linen room. 8 months of a house that ran from the bottom up hanging on a steel ring the size of a bottle cap. She had learned every lock behind these 2 keys. She had mapped this mansion the way she mapped an engine, and she was handing the map back. She held them out on her open palm. Okja looked at the keys and did not take them either, at first, and Chloe understood that for the old woman, this was the part that made it real, more than the suitcase, more than the paper. The keys coming off, the way they only came off when someone died or left or was carried out. Please, Chloe said. I don't want to leave them on a table. Tables are how bracelets happen. That reached her. Okja's hand came up and closed over the keys, and her fingers were cold, and she held Chloe's hand shut around them for 1 second longer than she needed to before she took them. Where will you go? Okja said. Tonight. Where? There's a room by the training airfield, weekly. I looked it up a week ago. Chloe had. She had done it the night the pump proved her right, sitting on this same narrow bed, not knowing she was doing arithmetic for today. It's close to where I'll be doing the last of my hours. I can walk to the library from it. You have money for a week. I have money for a week. She did not say that a week was all the runway she had, that the 1400 still came due Friday, that leaving without her wage meant she was walking off the edge of the only equation in her life that had ever closed. She did not say it because Okja could read a balance sheet in a face as well as Chloe could read one in an engine, and there was no use saying out loud what the 2 of them already knew. Wait here, Okja said suddenly, and went out. She came back 4 minutes later with an envelope. Not thick. Okja pressed it into Chloe's hands and closed her fingers over it the same way she had closed them over the keys. No, Chloe said, feeling the shape of the bills through the paper. Okja, no. It is mine. Not the house's. Mine. The old woman's chin came up. I have worked in this family 30 years and I have never once needed a reason to spend my own money, and I do not need one from you today. You take it, or you insult me, and I am too old to be insulted before lunch. Chloe's eyes stung. She looked at the ceiling until it passed, because if she started she would not stop, and there was no time. The vans were loading and the day was moving, and a woman leaving a house had to leave before the house noticed. I'll pay it back, she said. Every dollar, to your hand, when I'm licensed. I know you will. Okja said it plainly, the way you state a torque value. That is why I can give it. Money to a person like you is not spending. It is lending to a bridge that is being built. I have watched enough of this house go up in smoke to know where to put a little that will still be standing. She stepped back then, straightened her collar, became the head housekeeper again, because that was the mercy she had to offer, to make the leaving ordinary, to not stand in the door and weep, and make it a scene the house could feed on. "Go out the west service door," Okja said. "The vans are there. No one will look twice at one more person walking past crates. Do not go through the court. The lady's assistant has been in the court since 8. Jiwoo. Counting boxes. Okja's mouth thinned. That one counts everything. Go the west way and she will not have a number for you." Chloe picked up the case. It was not heavy. 8 months and it weighed almost nothing, and that told her something too, and she chose not to look at it. At the door she stopped. "The pump," she said. "When it drops its note again, and it will, in about a year, the whole Baring family runs on the same fatigue clock. Don't let them tell you it's fine, because it ran fine last week. Running fine last week is what a thing does right before it doesn't." Okja's eyes were wet now, and she let them be. "I will tell them the girl said so." "Don't." Chloe shook her head, gently. "Don't tell them the girl said so. Just tell them to listen on a Sunday, cold, low speed, before anyone opens a tap. Tell them it like it's yours. It's better if it's nobody's. Things last longer when nobody has to defend having thought of them." She had not planned to say that. It came up out of her like the second note under the first, the true thing hiding under the technical one. She was telling the old woman how to survive in a house that punished the clever. Be right without a name on it. Be useful invisibly. It was the exact advice Okja had given her on the first morning, handed back now, and they both heard it land. Okja nodded once, the way Sang-hoon had nodded, the way this house acknowledged truth when it could not afford to say it out loud. Then Chloe walked out. The service corridor was cool and smelled of floor wax and, faintly, of peonies from the crates by the far door. She went the west way. She passed a caterer in whites carrying a tray of glasses, and he did not look at her. She passed 2 of the security men, and they knew her face now, knew it from the security room that morning, and one of them looked and then looked away, and she could not tell if the looking away was contempt or something closer to respect, and she decided she did not need to know. The west service door was propped with a rubber wedge. Beyond it, gray morning, the vans, the crates, a driver on his phone. She stepped over the threshold with the suitcase in one hand and the envelope in her apron pocket and the keys no longer at her waist. And the strange lightness at her hip, where the keys had been, was the loudest thing about the whole leaving. She was 3 steps into the court when a voice said her name. Not Jiwoo, lower, from the shade of the loading overhang. Ellsworth. Sang-hoon. He was leaning against the brick with his arms folded and the earpiece in, and he had clearly been there a while, and Chloe understood at once that he had been posted, or had posted himself, to watch the vans, and that he had seen the whole thing coming, the way he saw everything coming. She stopped, set the case down, waited. She had learned that with him, you did not fill his silences, you let them sit, and what came out of them was usually straight. "He doesn't know," Sang-hoon said. "I know he doesn't. You want me to tell him? Now?" "No," she met his eyes. "After. There's a letter with Okja. He'll get it when he asks for the coffee." Sang-hoon considered that. His flat, once broken nose, his heavy, calm eyes that had watched the footage of her standing still, with her hands open, and understood the whole of her in 9 minutes of tape. "He'll ask why I let you walk," he said. "Tell him you didn't let me do anything." Chloe picked the case back up. "Tell him a person walking out a door isn't a security problem. I'm not carrying anything of his. You can check the bag." Something moved at the corner of his mouth that on another man would have been a smile. "I don't need to check the bag," he said. "I know what's in it, nothing that isn't yours." He unfolded his arms. "You solved the trap without touching it. Most people, the honest ones especially, they grab the thing to prove they've got nothing to hide. You stepped back and put your hands where the lens could see them. That's not honesty. Honesty panics. That's discipline. It's my father." She had said it so many times in this house it had worn smooth as the back of the watch. He fixed things nobody thanked him for. You learn early to make sure the tape agrees with you, before anyone comes looking. Sang-hoon looked at her for a long moment. "For what it's worth," he said. "And it's worth nothing. because I'm the man who let the trap get built in the first place. You're the only person who came through that security room this morning, who I'd trust to fix an aircraft I was going to be sitting in. It's worth something, Chloe said. She meant it. She would carry it further than the envelope. He stepped back into the shade and became the wall again, which was his mercy, the same as Oakjaw's, to let her go without a scene. Westgate's open for the vans, he said. You won't need a code. Go before the assistant finishes her count. She went. She walked past the crates, past the driver on his phone, out under the loading overhang and into the gray, and the gravel of the service drive crunched under her flats, and the great house sat behind her, with its 40 engines and its 2 jets, and its blueprint that would not be signed, and its bride 3 days from a wedding, and none of it belonged to her, and it never had, and the only thing she was taking was the only thing she had ever owned. She did not look back. Her father had a rule about that too. You do not look back at a car you have handed the keys to. It is not yours to worry about anymore. Whatever it does next, it does without you. The west gate stood open for the catering vans, exactly as Sang-hoon had said. She walked through it with 1 suitcase and a repaired zipper, and a week of money and a debt to an old woman she intended to pay to the hand. Behind her, whispers were already starting. She could not hear them yet. But she knew the shape of them, the way she knew the shape of a resonance before it climbed into a note. The maid is gone. Did you hear? The one from the hangar. The bracelet. They found a bracelet. She was sent away. No. She left. Left? Who leaves this house? Nobody leaves this house. She must have taken something. They always take something. The story would run without her now, and it would try to put a thing in her hands she had never held, and there was nothing she could do about that from a weekly room by an airfield except be, somewhere, provably, the person the story lied about. She reached the road. The morning had gone from gray to the pale start of gold at the edges. A bus stop stood 200 meters down, a bench and a bent post, and she walked toward it with her suitcase, and her hip was light where the keys had been, and for the first time in 8 months, the numbers in her head were not a countdown. They were just numbers. 1,400 by Friday, a week of rent, a debt she could name and mean to pay, hard numbers, unforgiving numbers, numbers that did not close, but hers, every one of them, hers. She set the case down at the bench and sat, and she took out the cheap phone with the taped corner, and she did not call her mother. Not yet. She would call when she had a room key in her hand and a true sentence to say, because Margaret could hear a lie down a phone line the way Chloe could hear a bearing die, and there was nothing true enough to say yet except I left, and I'm all right, and both of those were only half true this morning. Instead, she turned the phone over in her hand and looked back up the road, once, not at the house. The house was gone behind the wall, but at the top of the wall, where a security camera sat on its post, and she wondered if Sang-hoon was watching her on it right now, a woman on a bench with a suitcase, and she lifted her hand, just slightly, off her knee, palm open, the way she had stood in the guest wing so the lens could see she held nothing. Then the bus came around the bend, and she stood, and she did not look at the wall again. The room by the airfield was on the 2nd floor of a low brick building that had been a motel once and was now weekly lets for men who worked the freight ramp and women who worked the diner, and one aeronautical engineering student 4 months from a degree she could still barely believe she was going to finish. The manager was a tired woman behind a counter with a portable heater at her feet. She took the week's cash from Oakjaw's envelope, counted it twice, and slid a key across on a diamond of orange plastic. A real key. Chloe closed her hand around it and felt the weight of it against the emptiness at her hip, and the two things almost balanced. The room held a bed, a chair, a hot plate, a window. The window looked out over a fence and past the fence over the flat gray apron of the training field, where a small twin-engine trainer sat chalked and quiet under a work light, and Chloe stood at the glass a while and looked at it and felt the day finally set down on her shoulders all at once. She had no wage coming. Friday was still Friday. The 1,400 still stood in front of her like a wall she had walked toward for 8 months and had just chosen, on purpose, to face with less money than she'd had this morning. She had a week of rent and a debt to an old woman and a father's watch she had refused to sell. She sat on the bed, took out the phone with the taped corner. She did not call her mother. She had promised herself a true sentence first, and the truest sentence she had tonight was still half a wound. But she opened the folder of formulas and set it on her knee, and she found the page on resonance, the one with the ghost gray last line, and she turned it over to the blank back the way she'd turned the resignation, and she began, pencil, small letters, to write out the plan. Room, paid, 1 week. Library, walking distance. Final lab hours, the last of them, the ones that put her name on the analysis of a real airframe, a number under each. The numbers did not close. She wrote them anyway, because her father had taught her that you do not refuse to look at the gauge just because the reading is bad. You write down the bad reading. That is how you find the part that is actually broken. Somewhere across the city, a house was pulling white peonies out of crates. Somewhere in that house, a folded letter sat buttoned into an old woman's pocket, waiting for a man to ask for his coffee and be told, instead, that the girl who brought it had signed her own name to her own leaving and walked out a service door choosing nothing they could take. Chloe turned the phone face down on the blanket, and she did not look at it, and she went back to the page, and under the last bad number she wrote one word, the only promise she was willing to make out loud tonight, pressing hard enough that the pencil did not come out ghost gray at all. Mine. The review hall smelled of floor wax and cold coffee, and Chloe found her seat in the 4th row an hour before anyone told her she was allowed to be there. She had walked from the weekly room. 90 minutes on foot, with the printed folder of formulas under her arm and the cracked tablet in her bag, because bus fare was a number she was counting again, now that there was no wage behind her. She wore one of the 2 off-work dresses. She had ironed it against the hot plate lid, flat and slow, the way she once ironed linens for another house. Daniel Whitfield found her before the session opened. "You came," he said. He had a mechanical pencil behind one ear and the ID lanyard turned backward the way he always wore it. "I wasn't sure you would. You said the analysis was on the agenda." "The analysis is the agenda." He sat down beside her without asking, folding his lanky frame into the small chair. "Second item, after the maintenance board finishes congratulating itself." Chloe pressed the folder flatter against her knees. "I'm not on staff anymore, Mr. Whitfield. Wherever this goes, my name doesn't need to travel with it." He looked at her for a moment, the kind of look that measured a bolt before torquing it. "That's exactly why it does," he said, and stood, because the board had started. She did not know Taehyun was in the room until the 3rd speaker. He came in through the side door, late, the way a man comes in when the room is his to be late to. Sang-hoon a half step behind, earpiece catching the overhead light. Taehyun took a seat along the far wall, not the reserved front row where a placard held his name, and Chloe understood the choice the instant she saw it. He had come to listen, not to be seen listening. Her hands went flat on the folder. She kept her face where she had learned to keep it. Furniture, dead behind the eyes, 8 months of practice, and it held for exactly as long as it took Daniel Whitfield to walk to the podium. "Item 2, Daniel said. He clicked the remote. Behind him, a schematic bloomed on the screen. A forward engine mount, an L bracket, 1 bolt circled in red. 3 weeks ago, a private operator flagged a resonance event in a business jet, number 2 engine. The event only presented above 80% fan speed and red clean on the ground. Cold. It had flown that way for at least 2 cycles. A murmur ran through the maintenance board. Somebody near the front folded his arms. Standard inspection missed it, Daniel went on. Sensor logs missed it. Balance checks missed it. What caught it was a diagnosis made by ear, on the floor, and then confirmed by a throttle cut test. Pull to 80%. The flutter drops out clean, like a switch. That told the operator it was resonance, not the engine. 1 part vibrating with the fan at 1 specific rotation. They opened the mount, found the bracket. 1 bolt backed off 1/3 of a turn, bright metal already powdering the seat. He clicked again. A single line of analysis. Coin flip margins. A hand-drawn probability curve someone had scanned in. "This is the write-up," Daniel said. "This is the reasoning that found it. And I want the board to understand something before we move on. Because there's a version of this story going around already, and the version is wrong." The folded arms man near the front spoke. "We heard the operator's people caught it." "The operator's people torqued a bolt someone else told them to check," Daniel said. He did not raise his voice. He never did. The reasoning on this screen belongs to one person, a student. 4 months from her license. She did the diagnosis. She called the test. She named the part before anyone opened anything. She wasn't paid to. She wasn't asked to. She heard it wrong across a hanger, and she couldn't leave it alone. Chloe's pulse went into her throat. She kept her eyes on the folder. Her name is Chloe Ellsworth, Daniel said. She's sitting in the 4th row. The room turned. She felt it turn the way you feel a draft before you find the open window. She stood, because sitting would have been worse. She did not smile. She let them look, the way she had let a camera look at her open hands in a house that was trying to make her a thief. One breath, then she sat back down. The internship board met Tuesday, Daniel said, still to the room, not to her. The airframe fatigue placement. 1 seat. 14 applicants, most of them a year further along than she is. He looked at her now. It's hers. On the analysis. On nothing else. She had known it was coming. He had told her by phone 2 days ago, in the weekly room, standing at the window over the training apron, while the twin-engine trainer ran up outside. She had thought she was ready to hear it said in a room. She was not. Because across the hall, along the far wall, Taehyun had gone very still, and she made the mistake of looking at exactly the wrong moment, and she saw him understand. Not the internship. He would have arranged 10 of those with a phone call and thought nothing of it. What she saw land on him was the other thing, the word Daniel had used and then walked past. Voluntarily. Nobody paid her. Nobody asked her. She watched him do the arithmetic she had done for him in a hangar over a used jet, the 11-month gap in the logbook, the corrosion signed off 4 times without a repair, and she watched him run it now on a woman instead of an airframe, and arrive where the numbers actually pointed. Every distance she had kept, every stool she had refused, the rule she had said out loud with a whole body of space between them. He had let himself read all of it, for weeks, as a maid being careful of her place. And here, in a review hall that had nothing to do with him, with a folder of formulas and a 4th-row seat she had walked 90 minutes to reach, the last reading he could tell himself flipped. She had never wanted anything from his house. She had proven it by leaving with less than she came. He looked at her across the hall and she looked back and neither of them moved, and it was Sang-hoon who touched his shoulder and said something low, and Taehyun stood and left through the side door he had come in by and did not stay for item 3. Daniel sat back down beside her when the session broke. You didn't tell me the Yoon jet was his, he said quietly. You didn't ask whose jet it was, Chloe said. You asked what was wrong with it. He almost smiled. The placement's real. Monday, 8 a.m. Bring the tablet. Buy a new tablet. I'll fix the tablet. Course you will, he said, and left her the folder and the room, and a line of maintenance men who wanted, now, to shake her hand. She called her mother from the bus stop outside the hall. She had promised herself one true sentence before she called, and she finally had it. Mama, she said, when Margaret picked up, I got the airframe placement. My name's on a real analysis. I did it alone. There was a silence on the line that Chloe recognized. Her mother taking off the reading glasses on the beaded chain, the way she did when she needed both hands for something that wasn't in front of her. You did it alone, Margaret repeated. I did. And the house? That house you've been keeping quiet about for 8 months? The one I could hear in your voice every Sunday? Chloe watched a car pass. I don't work there anymore, Mama. I left, on my own. I want you to hear that part in my voice, too. Another silence. Then, softer than the commandment, but the same shape as it. You didn't owe them $1 going out. Not one. Your father, Margaret said, and stopped, and Chloe heard her put the glasses back on. He'd have made you tell him what the analysis said, line by line, till he understood it or till you got tired. I know. Tell me the wire cleared. Chloe closed her eyes. The tuition. Friday. The $1,400 that had run underneath everything like a bearing an hour from seizing. It clears, she said. The placement carries a stipend. Real one this time. She had checked it 3 times. It was smaller than she needed, and it was enough. I'm not going to lie to you about a lab stipend that doesn't exist, Mama. I did that in the spring. I'm done doing that. The line was quiet a while. Come home when the license is signed, Margaret said. I want to see your name on the paper before I see your face. That's the only order I've got left in me. Yes, ma'am. She hung up and sat on the bench and did not cry, which was its own kind of work, and then she took out the printed page with the numbers that hadn't closed, the one where she'd written. Mine. Pressing hard enough to keep the pencil off ghost gray, and under it, now, she wrote the stipend figure, and the numbers closed. Not comfortably, but they closed. The wedding was in 3 days, and then it was the morning of it, and Chloe was not going to go. She had decided that in the weekly room with the certainty of someone deciding not to touch a bracelet. Going was interference. Going was making herself the story on a day that belonged, whatever else was true in it, to another woman. The invitation had come by hand. Okja brought it. The old housekeeper climbed the outside stair of the ex-motel in her gray dress with the white collar and the ring of keys still at her waist, and she knocked. And when Chloe opened the door, Okja looked at the hot plate and the single chair and the twin-engine trainer out the window and pressed her lips into the deep smile lines and said, "So this is where the clever one landed." "For now," Chloe said. Okja put an envelope on the little table. Not money. Chloe knew the money envelope. She'd been carrying the debt of it like a torque spec she meant to hit exactly. This was cream, heavy, with a wax seal already broken. "I'm not delivering it as staff," Okja said. "I'm delivering it as the woman who watched you hand me 2 keys instead of leaving them on a table." Chloe turned it over. Her name, handwritten. Not Seirin's hand, not Jiwoo's neat block letters. "He invited me," she said, "as a guest. Pale yellow if you have it." He was specific. Okja's sharp eyes did not blink. "He is not asking you to stop anything, child. I asked him that myself. To your face I'd have said it. He said, and I'm giving it to you the way he gave it to me." She drew a line about my wedding. She should be allowed to see whether the line held. Chloe set the envelope down. "And Seirin?" Okja's jaw tightened. "The lady has been saying things. In the West rooms. To the florists, the caterers, anyone who'll carry it." She met Chloe's eyes. "That the maid was let go. That things went missing. That there's a reason the girl who fixed the plane isn't in the house anymore." She reached into her collar and drew out a folded page, worn soft, and Chloe knew it before it opened. Her own resignation, in her own hand, on the back of a resonance equation. "No one asked me to go." Underlined twice. "I've been carrying this in my collar for 3 days, Okja said. "Every time she opens her mouth, I open mine. I read her the line. The staff heard you leave with 1 suitcase and no reference, child. They watched you hand me the keys. Sang-hoon put on record that the footage cleared you and named the girl who planted the bracelet." She refolded the page. "The lady's rumor is a bearing that's already thrown. It's just still spinning. Come Monday, nobody in that house will repeat it." Chloe looked at the resignation letter going back into the old woman's collar, and something in her chest that had been braced for a long time let go a quarter turn. "I owe you an envelope of money," she said. "You owe me a landing gear," Okja said. 40 tons at 140 knots. You told me that in the linen room, one time, when you came up from the hangar alive. Pay me in that." She went to the door. "No." Stopped. "The pale yellow, do you have it?" Chloe thought of the sophisticated, understated dress she'd bought secondhand a year ago for interviews she never got, still zipped in the suitcase because she couldn't bear to sell it. "I have it," she said. She arrived after the guests were seated, and she took a chair at the back, on the aisle, where a person could be present and disturb nothing. Pale yellow silk, her long auburn hair down in the elegant waves she almost never had time to shape, small silver at her ears. She folded her hands in her lap and she watched, and she did not reach for anything. Seirin came down the aisle in white, veil long, spine straight as a mast, and she was beautiful the way a thing is beautiful when it has cost the person carrying it everything they had. Chloe watched her and felt no triumph. She had never wanted the woman's place. She had said so on her knees on a stone floor, and she had meant it. At the front, Taehyun waited in charcoal. He watched Seirin come the whole way, and his face gave the room nothing, and Chloe was one of perhaps 3 people alive who could read what wasn't there. Seirin reached the front, turned, found Chloe at the back in 8 seconds flat, the way she'd once found her across a hangar in the time it takes to count inches. Her chin lifted. Her voice, when it came, was low and meant only for the man beside her. But the hall was hushed for a vow, and it carried further than she knew. "Keep the black maid away from this," Seyrin said. "Today of all days, send her out." Chloe kept her hands in her lap. She had come to see whether the line held. She would not be the one to break it. The hall held its breath. Somewhere a chair scraped. A grandmother in the second row put a hand to her pearls. Chloe felt the eyes that had turned to her in the review hall turn to her again now, in a different room, for a worse reason, and she gave them the same thing she had given a camera and a security office and a woman kneeling to her level on a stone floor. Open hands, nothing to hide and nothing to take. She let them look. She had gotten very good at letting people look until looking told them the truth. Taehyun looked at Seyrin for a long moment. Then he looked, once, at the back of the room, and then he looked at neither of them, but at the middle distance, the place a man looks when he is finally reading a note he has carried without signing. "No," he said. Not to Chloe, not about Chloe. He did not turn the room toward the woman in pale yellow, did not name her, did not make her the reason. He said it to the space in front of him, and to the officiant, and to the family in the front rows, and to the merger folded into every seat in the hall. "I've signed things I shouldn't have," he said, quietly, and only the front rows caught the shape of it, and the back rows leaned. "I've watched them corrode for years and signed. Monitored. And flown on anyway. My father built a structure when I was 9 and I kept signing it." He turned to Seyrin, and whatever the room saw, what he gave her was not cruelty. "This is mine, not yours. You didn't do anything today that I hadn't already agreed to for both of us, a long time ago. I'm the one who agreed. I'm the one unsigning it." Seyrin's face did not fall the way Chloe had once refused to let it fall on her account. It hardened, which was its own mercy. A person who has spent all her years buying a place does not weep for it in front of witnesses. She goes cold, and she keeps her spine, and she preserves the one thing left, which is the manner of the leaving. "You'll regret this," Seyrin said. "Probably," Taehyun said. "But I'll have decided it." He did not look at Chloe again. He walked back up the aisle alone, past the guests, past the peonies, past the woman in pale yellow, whom he did not so much as glance toward, because to glance would have been to make her the cause, and he had spent one honest sentence making sure she was not. He went out the doors into the light. Only then, only after the doors had swung, and the hall had erupted behind her into the sound of a wedding coming apart, only after Seyrin had gathered her veil and her family and her manor and swept out the side without a backward look, only then did Chloe stand. She walked out the front, down the steps, into the courtyard where he stood with his back to the hall, hands loose at his sides, a man in a charcoal suit at the end of an event that was no longer his. "Yoon Tae-hyun," she said. He turned. It was the first time in 8 months and 3 weeks that either of them had used the other's whole name to their face. "Ellsworth," he said. "You didn't have to invite me to see that. I didn't invite you to see it." He looked at the pale yellow silk, and then at her face, and stayed on the face. "I invited you so that when I did it, it would be true that you were in the room, and I still did it alone. So no one, including you, could ever say you were the reason." A breath. "You drew a line about building anything on another woman's floor. I couldn't cross it, so I took the floor out from under myself first." Chloe's throat worked. "That's the most expensive repair I've ever heard described. You told me once, fix it or fly it. Stop signing." The corner of his mouth moved, the closest thing to the laugh Seyrin had chased through 9 dinners and never caught. "I fixed it." "You could have kept flying. It was clean on the ground." "It was a coin," he said. "You taught me that too. And I got tired of how many times I was asking to flip it." She looked at him a while. Behind them, the hall was still loud. Somewhere in it, Okja was reading a resignation letter aloud to anyone who tried to say the maid had been sent away. "I have a placement Monday," Chloe said. "Airframe fatigue. I got it alone. I need you to hear that part." "I heard it in the review," he said. From across the room, I heard all of it. He paused. "Landing gear." She blinked. "You said if money weren't the equation, you'd build landing gear. The part nobody thanks." He looked at the sky, then at her. Go build it. Don't build it for me, and don't build it because of me. I don't want to be a thing you owe either. I don't intend to owe anybody, Chloe said. I've got exactly one debt left, and it's an envelope of an old woman's own money, and I'm paying it in a hand when my license is signed. That's the only kind of debt worth carrying, he said. She thought of the steel watch in the sock in her suitcase, 30 years of another man's wrist worn into the caseback, the watch she had almost sold in the spring to make a number, and had refused to, because selling it would have meant still needing something from a house she was leaving. I kept my father's watch, she said, before she knew she was going to. I was going to sell it for $400 once. I didn't. Some things you carry out whole, or you don't carry them at all. Taehyun took that in the way he took a fault report, slowly, all the way to the margin. He'd have liked the landing gear, he said. He'd have liked that nobody thanks the part that holds 40 tons at 140 knots and never gets its name on the fuselage, Chloe said. That was his whole religion. She should have gone then. There was a bus, and a weekly room, and a placement in 2 days, and a mother who wanted to see a name on a paper before she saw a face. She turned to go. Ellsworth. She stopped. The pump, Taehyun said. The well pump. Sang-hoon says it'll drop a note again inside the year. Same bearing family. He says you told the housekeeper how to listen for it. He almost smiled. You gave it away. To the house. On your way out. Like it was nobody's. Some things you leave running for the next person, Chloe said. You don't get to take the whole engine with you. She got the bus. She did not look back at the courtyard, the way you do not look back at a car whose keys you have handed over. She rode to the weekly room, and she hung the pale yellow silk on the back of the single chair, and she sat on the bed with the printed page of closed numbers, and, under the word, mine. She wrote, Monday, 8 a.m., and she pressed hard, and it did not come out ghost gray at all. The car sat on a rise above the training field with its hood still warm, and they sat on the hood, and the sun went down over the apron where a twin-engine trainer was tied for the night. Months had done their quiet work. There was no uniform now. There was no fiancé and no wedding, and no employer between them. Chloe wore her own clothes and her license was signed. Margaret had seen the paper before she saw the face, exactly as ordered, and then had seen the face and held it in both hands. The airframe placement had become the next thing, and the next thing after that, the way a career becomes itself one honest torque at a time. The envelope of Okja's money had been repaid in a hand, dollar for dollar, in the linen room, with a promise thrown in about a well pump and a bearing, and a Sunday morning when the water was still cold. Taehyun had spent those months becoming a man with no structure signed over his head. It had cost him things that money could not buy back, which was the point. A person who wants to build harbors has to first stop paying the price of never building them. He had not called her while any of it was still tangled. He had waited until there was nothing left between them that either of them owed. You know why it had to be this way, she said, watching the light go copper on the field. Because you wouldn't steal another man from another woman, he said. Because I wouldn't, she agreed. So you had to stop being something to be stolen. She leaned back on her hands on the warm hood. You had to become free before you could be chosen. He was quiet a moment. Then, and am I? She looked at him. The line she'd drawn on her knees on a stone floor was gone, not because she'd erased it, but because he'd taken the floor out himself, and there was nothing left to build over. Just ground now. Just two people and a warm hood and a plane tied for the night. Yes, Chloe said. The sun went the rest of the way down, and neither of them reached for anything they hadn't earned, and that, finally, was the whole difference. She had refused to steal another woman's man, so he had made himself free before he could be hers. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been the smartest person in the room while everyone only saw the uniform you wore? Have you ever refused something you wanted because taking it would have meant betraying who you are? And when a lie was planted to bury you, did the truth ever arrive in time to clear your name? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, truth, and self-respect, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.